Another strong start to a game, another 2-goal lead, and another loss for the Seattle Kraken. Honestly, at this point, I'm wondering if they aren't trying to find ways to blow these games to make sure they secure their spot in the draft lotto seeding. I mean, I know they're not, but still. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R for the third to last game of the season and the second to last home game for the Seattle Kraken, and a game that they end up losing 5-3 to the LA Kings. Real quick though, as a side note, if you could just go around in life challenging people to fights that you perceive to have wronged you, like hockey players can out on the ice, then I would seriously consider dropping gloves with whoever at the scheduling department decided to put a back-to-back for 2 of the last 4 games of the season. Actually, it's even worse than that because originally this was supposed to be 2 of the last 3 games of the season before that Winnipeg game got moved here to be the last game on May 1st. I mean, honestly, at this point, the only thing I need more than a haircut is a freaking nap. And based on how they played the second half of this game, I think there might be some players on that Kraken roster that have a similar feeling as far as the nap is concerned anyway. Before we get there though, it honestly is a very good first period for the Kraken once again, really dominating the first period from start to finish. Maybe not necessarily offensively, it takes them a while to get going there, but defensively, they shut the Kings down throughout that first period, in the end only allowing 2 shots on goal to the Kraken's 12 at the other end of the ice. And that isn't necessarily to say that the Kings didn't have their chances, it's just that anytime they had a chance, the Kraken defense, especially backcheck, was very strong, blocking anything that the Kings did try to get to the net, and winning puck battles along the boards, not allowing the Kings to get long stays in the offensive end. And that's even true with both teams getting a power play in the first half of the first period. Neither one goes much of anywhere, especially the Kings power play, which sees no chances on net for the Kings, and 1 chance shorthanded for the Kraken that is shut down. At least for the Kraken, they use their power play, which comes after the Kings one, to start getting that momentum rolling offensively, and while at the halfway point of the first period, I think there were only like 6 total shots on goal, Seattle does again end up finishing the first period with 12, and they would end up needing every single one of them, as it takes until that 12th shot on goal with a minute left in the first for them to eventually get on the board. The goal comes off of a faceoff win for the Kraken in the offensive zone, followed by a very nice play between Gord and McCann. It's McCann who wins the faceoff in the first place, back to Gord, who loops behind McCann and then out to the front end of the faceoff circle, dropping it back for McCann, who fires a laser right into the back of the net, finally beating Quick, who was very strong in the back half of this first, up until this one for McCann. It's his 27th of the season as he tries to make a bid for 30 here at the end. It'll take a couple of good games at the last couple of the season, but it still is very possible for him to get there, especially with shots like this one. And carrying that 1-0 lead into the second, the Kraken are actually able to keep that momentum early on in the middle period, but eventually the Kings are able to turn it around and turn it around pretty quickly. Even with that said though, it's Seattle against the flow of play, and it's Ryan Donato pretty much doing it all himself. Susie gets it up to Eberle, who gets a drop past Donato entering the offensive zone, and from there, Donato just takes the puck along the boards and then cuts right by the goal line, going up around a couple of players, weaving in and out, dangling and deking around, until eventually he finishes it into the back of the net, over an outstretched, backwards reaching glove of Quick to give the Kraken the 2-0 lead. Again, for Donato, an absolute beauty of a goal, and actually probably one of the better Kraken goals of the season. Not one of the better 3, but maybe even a top 5, if not certainly a top 10, taking it from the blue line around all sorts of players and eventually finishing it for his 16th of the season. Really, the only unfortunate part of this goal is the fact that it doesn't lead to another shift in momentum back in the Kraken favor as the Kings maintain momentum out of the Donato goal. And as we get to the back half of the second period, as we talked about, this is where things start to fall apart, and they fall apart pretty quick. First, just past the 10-minute mark, it's Velarde who finds a hole in the Kraken defense, and while he's standing there, the puck finds him from the boards, and he finds the back of the net, beating Grubauer just in the top corner. It's a very nice shot from Velarde, putting it in the one spot short side that he could fit it into. But still, that being said, it's probably one that Grubauer should be able to come up with. And just like that, the Kings and their disco ball helmets are within 1. Next, 3.5 minutes later, it's Arvidsson picking up a puck in the corner behind the Kraken net. Susie fails to finish a check, which would become a bit of a theme for the Kraken as a whole defensively throughout the night. And as a result, Arvidsson's able to get around behind the Kraken net. Instead of going for the wraparound chance that Grubauer was prepared for, he throws it out in front to a crashing and wide open Philip Deneau, who puts it into the back of the net to tie the game at 2. Really, not a lot more Grubauer could have done on this one, and to be fair to Cale Fleury, he actually was in the right place here. He just doesn't get his stick on that pass from Arvidsson to Deneau, so it ends up in the back of the net. This time though, the Kraken are able to respond and do so quickly, as less than a minute later, it's Donato getting a puck up to Beniers, who carries it into the offensive zone and then passes it over to Eberle, who just is kind of allowed to walk right down the slot as the Kings have a defensive breakdown of their own, and a few puck handles later, Eberle takes the shot and puts it in past Quick to give the Kraken back the lead. It's 3-2. So the Kings basically let Eberle do whatever the heck he wants. He says thank you very much and gets his second goal in as many games, his 21st of the season, and with the primary assist, Beniers is also back on the score sheet once again, his 7th point in 8 games in the NHL, and yeah, a pretty good start for his career. Unfortunately, that Kraken lead would not last very long at all, as just a couple minutes later, the Kings are back on the scoreboard, tying it at 3. This one doesn't necessarily really come from a defensive breakdown. I mean, yes, it probably would be good if somebody was a little bit closer to Moore here next to the net. This, though, is a little bit of just an unlucky bounce for the Kraken, as the shot that leads to the goal, or I should say the pass to Moore that ends up leading to the goal, is deflected by Beniers right in between the two of them, which slows the puck down enough that it throws off the rest of the Kraken, and Moore is still able to get a stick onto it and put it into the back of the net to tie up the game. The Kraken shortly after do end up getting a power play to finish off the second period, though that really doesn't go very well at all. In fact, the Kings probably get the better scoring chance of the two teams on it, and as we start the third period with a little bit left of that power play, it is eventually killed off completely. And then not long after, still early in the third, the Kraken defense is back at it. A soft forecheck once again behind the Kraken net. This time, I want to say it was Alexiak, who did not have a particularly good game in this one, allows Lemieux to get a pass backhand out in front of the net, where a wide open Lias Andersson is able to get a shot off and puts it into the back of the net. Once again, Grubauer put on a bit of an island by the Kraken defense here. Soft forechecking and just letting guys get wide open in front of the net leads to the 4-3 LA lead. And just seconds later, right after the face-off with the same Kings line out on the ice, Anderson finds Dursey coming to the offensive zone with a crossing pass, and he puts it in the back of the net to put the Kings up 2 with 2 goals in just, again, a few seconds. This time though, well, again, there's no excuse defensively for allowing a goal that quickly. For Grubauer, there is a pretty good excuse for this one getting in, and that is some obvious goaltender interference by Kupari, which is challenged by the Kraken and correctly overturned, so they do get a bit of a break here. Eventually, a few minutes later, the Kraken, and really more specifically the Wennberg line of all lines, are finally able to get their first good offensive sequence in really 2 periods ever since the end of the first. Unfortunately, it still ends up coming empty, and even in spite of the Kraken getting 3 power plays late in this game, including over a minute of 5-on-3, that all ends up just sputtering out without really even any dangerous chances other than one pretty good look that Beniers got. Quick's able to save that, and eventually the Kraken do go empty net, which eventually the Kings do find to finally get us to that final score of 5-3. At this point, honestly, I don't even really know what the point of the Kraken going empty net at the end of games is. They're obviously terrible with the man advantage, as we've seen with the power play, and for some reason are better at 5-on-5, plus then at least you have a goaltender to stop those empty net goals from going in, which seems like it would give you a better chance. Obviously, that's not really how it works, and if you don't go empty net, then it just looks like you've given up. But yeah, it's pretty disappointing how bad the Kraken are with that man advantage and how lazy the power play looks. In the end, with this game for the Kraken, it ends up looking a lot like those games in Minnesota and in Dallas, where the Kraken get off to a really good start, this time even getting that into the early part of the second period, but fall apart completely in the back half of the game, the second half of the second, and the first half of that third period. It's not quite as perfectly just right as the second period like in those 2 games, but it's still a 20-minute span of hockey where the Kraken defensively just completely quit on the game. I suppose, at least unlike the game in Vancouver a night ago, this time it wasn't just a bunch of odd man rushes that they were letting up. This time the defensive issue was just terrible back-checking and not finishing off those hits along the boards, allowing the Kings to really have their way along the boards in the offensive end and get those passes out to guys that were, again, pretty much left wide open, finding holes in the Kraken defense. And again, I get that this was the second half of a back-to-back in the last few games of the season for a team that's not going to the playoffs, so there probably isn't a great amount of incentive for these guys to be finishing hard checks into the boards, especially the ones that have played the vast majority of this season, but it still would be nice to see a little bit more effort, and at least the attitude of wanting to make up for how the season has gone and get a little of that frustration out here in these last few games. At least going into next season, it would be good to see this team get that physical mentality back that we saw, if nothing else, at the beginning of the season, even if it did kind of peter out as the season went along. Now, yes, obviously there were other issues at the beginning of the season, but at least back then the Kraken were laying some pretty big hits, and that's something we would like to see come back, if nothing else, to start off next season. And just for a quick visual representation of just how bad the Kraken were defensively in that second and third period, again, remembering they allowed just 2 shots on goal in the first, by the end of the game, this is what their hockey stat card looked like. This is based on game score over the course of the game. And those dark blue parts in the negative space, that's all the defensive efforts from those players. So, as you can see, that's a whole lot of dark blue and a whole lot of bad defense being played. With really the only 4 Kraken players that actually played good defense over the course of the entire game being Will Borgen, and the 3 players that make up the 4th line, those being Cheyenne, Donskoy, and Geeky. So then, as we do get to the Kraken 3 stars of the game, starting from the bottom this time going up, I am going to give that 3rd star to Will Borgen for that defensive effort. Obviously, I could have given it to any of those guys on the 4th line as well, but I didn't really think it was fair to pick any one of them out as they all had pretty decent games defensively, and honestly, other than Geeky, none of them stood out a ton offensively. And while Borgen doesn't necessarily stand out offensively either, he did have pretty clearly the best defensive game of any of the defensemen, and that's worth mentioning in a game where everyone else pretty much gave up defensively. As for the 1st and 2nd stars in the game, I'm not going to argue too much with the official 1st and 2nd star given out, somehow the Kraken getting both of those in spite of losing 5-3, but those do end up going to Jordan Eberle and Ryan Donato. Now, I do think these two are fairly interchangeable as they both have a goal and an assist in the game, so you can make your argument for which one you think should be 1st and which one you think should be 2nd. The one switch I am going to have from the official decision made of having Eberle be the 1st is I'm actually going to have Donato be the 1st, the only difference for me being the fact that that Donato goal was a much prettier goal than the Eberle one, which isn't to take away from Eberle's goal, it's just that Donato's was, again, a very, very nice single effort all the way through the offensive zone and through pretty much the entire LA defense. But if you disagree with me, or even if you agree with me, as always, you can feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know your 3 stars of the game, your big takeaways, and what we're looking forward to in these last 2 games of the season. Obviously, some honorable mentions as far as stars are concerned could be, again, that 4th line, or even Matty Beniers with, again, his 7th point in 8 NHL games. With that, we have reached the point in this one where I say, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I appreciate you using them. And until next time, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.